Andrew Miller, Shane Black from Hook'emHeadlines.com, the Hook'em Horns show. We're coming back at you all this week, looking at the Texas versus Iowa State matchup this weekend in Ames. Number 7 Texas comes in 9-1, 6-1 record in Big 12 play. Iowa State 6-4 and 5-2, I believe, in Big 12 play. Both teams are, doing really well of late, just regarding success in the win column. Iowa State wins in 4 of its last 5 games. Texas has won 4 in a row. The wins have come in different ways for Texas. Again, the success in the win column looks good, but 3 of the last 4 games, you've coughed up 20-plus point leads in the second half to see those dwindle down to one score leads. And Texas, again, you get these road wins in Big 12 play, or like a top 25 win with your backup quarterback over Kansas State. Those wins are great. It's much better to have an ugly, close win than a pretty loss in conference play, especially on the road. And so I'm not complaining too much about it. It's more or less like a red flag that you watch for each game, because eventually that is the type of thing where if Texas plays with fire, eventually you will get burned, because this team has got some weird quirks to it that are kind of hard to describe. Both sides of the ball have different things that just are a little confounding this year. But as a whole, Texas is a team that definitely has the talent to get to the playoff, definitely easily, I think, has the talent to win the Big 12 championship game, especially if they end up playing a team like Oklahoma State or, Kansas State with Ewers healthy. And so I'm confident heading into this game, but Iowa State definitely is one of the harder games that Texas has on the November slate. TCU wasn't easy last weekend. He had that 26-6 lead in the third quarter, and then you saw that dwindle very quickly, just like you did against Kansas State and Houston. That one got really close, though. That one I was nervous about, to say the very least, because TCU was driving and we weren't doing anything on offense. You lose Jonathan Brooks, arguably the team MVP this year, at least on offense, and things are looking pretty dire. But Texas escapes with a win. Kansas State was a similar story where Texas facing a really good team, but then you had your backup quarterback last week with Quinn Ewers, and I really thought we'd be able to keep our foot on the gas in the second half and close that game out. On a more positive note, though, I think that, Texas, the defense has been looking good for, I think outside of the offense putting them in some tough spots, I think the defense has been looking pretty good this year. There's been some coverage busts that have been costly. You clean those up, and I think down the stretch, this defense is going to look really good. Also, the offense has to stop putting them in such bad situations late in games. On the plus side of the field, after they just got off maybe a couple minutes ago, I think that the defense would be in even better shape. They're already, I think, the best defense in the Big 12, especially along the defensive line. But when you got what did they have last weekend? 3-4 possessions that started at least on 40-plus yard line of TCU's. And so it was a similar story against Kansas State. And so, yeah, I think you got to clean that up. And I think the defense is looking really good. Generically, Shane, I talked a long time about like kind of how I'm feeling about these groups coming into Iowa State, because we didn't do our storylines video heading into this week. For me, I guess, to sum it up, I think the offense, it's obviously looked good in the first halves of games recently, not so good in the second half. And I think the defense, I stop putting them in tough situations, clean up some of the coverage busts. Otherwise, I think it's looking pretty spot on in Big 12 play.
Yeah, I mean, the defense has been awesome through 3 quarters. Pretty much the whole season. And it's the fourth quarter that's given us trouble. And you mentioned it. Some of that is Texas putting them, the offense is putting the defense in not the best spots. And even if they're not turning the football over, 3-and-outs or quick drives are absolutely killer. That defense spends a lot of time on the field in the fourth quarter. And we've seen it when teams just kind of know they need to pass to put up points. This Texas defense can be had. So hopefully as the Longhorns get more healthy in the back end, that continues to, shore itself up. We've seen a bunch of different rotations in the secondary, and it seems like those are starting to figure themselves out if you look at recent game snap counts. So hopefully Sark's kind of figuring out what's working, and he just kind of sticks to that. But yeah, it's certainly an issue, those fourth quarter defensive problems, which stem from the lack of offensive execution. So Sark keeps saying it, but when this team puts together a complete game, it's going to be scary. They got 2 regular season games left, and yeah, I know Texas sits alone atop the Big 12 standings right now at 6-1. But if you lose either one of these last 2 games, you're likely not going to end up in Arlington. You don't hold the tiebreaker against Oklahoma. If you lose this week against Iowa State, you won't hold the tiebreaker there. So, as much as it seems like we're talking college football playoff picture, there's a decent scenario. You drop a game, you could finish 10-2, 7-2 in conference play. Not only miss out on the college football playoff, but you're missing out on a Big 12 title game appearance. So Texas really needs to kind of get all of its ducks in a row and be ready to play as they enter Ames. Luckily, the Cyclones didn't help themselves with some comments they made to the media. I'm sure if you're watching this, you've seen the comments. I don't have his name top of mind, but offensive lineman that
Jared Hufford starting left guard.
Yeah. So and we were talking about this offline. He's a good player, but he's not going to be able to handle the Texas front by himself. So he just kind of made it tougher on the rest of those guys across the lines of scrimmage, where Texas has the decisive advantage with guys like Sweat Murphy. Trill Carter played a lot of good snaps against TCU, and I think they'll be able to use their size to affect Rocco Beck in the pocket. But, yeah, this is a massive game. Under the lights in Ames, senior night for them. They're going to be juiced up. I hope Texas is ready to play. It's one of those things. I mean, I was talking to a buddy this week. How much different, and you can come at me and say a lot different, but how much different is this team from last year's team? The only thing that's different is the results. I mean, I went down and let me see if I can find it, but this team's blowing leads just like the team was last year, except this year that lead, instead of 14, the Longhorns get it out to 21 or 24. And then they're able to hold on at the end, where last year was 14, and then they'd give it up right at the end, lose by 3 or a touchdown. So,
yeah, I'll follow up on your point there. I do think that this team, the differences are had in a few spots where, offensively, you didn't have Adonai Mitchell last year. You didn't have Quinn Ewers playing as well as he has. You also didn't have a backup, I think, as polished as Hudson Card. So different situations there. On defense, obviously, you would love to have a guy like Anthony Cook at safety right now, where you're kind of having some struggles in the position, especially in coverage. And then a linebacker too. Anthony Hill has been really productive, having a special season, I think, as a true freshman. Really coming through as a really solid pass rusher in that kind of hybrid edge rusher role. But DeMario Overshown, man, he did a lot for us. He was a really explosive playmaker at linebacker. And so I think that's where most of your differences are accounted for, outside of the obvious that you don't have Bijan Robinson and Rashawn Johnson. Yeah. Starting off here, my first reason why I think Texas can handily defeat Iowa State. At a high level, I think Texas is much better up front on both sides of the ball than the Cyclones. Specifically on offense, I think that Texas will hold up very well in pass protection, give Ewers a lot of time to throw. Iowa State has had trouble rushing the passer this season. They have had, I think, the third lowest pressure rate in the Big 12 this season. Third lowest sack rate, second fewest sacks per game, 1.4. Sack rate about 6.6%. Now, their sack rate's pretty inflated by facing a few bad teams in Big 12 play. Against the 4 best offensive lines they faced this season, they are averaging under a sack per game and around 5 quarterback pressures. And so I'm not threatened really by this Iowa State defensive front. I think some of the sources of their issues, because they were a pretty decent pass rushing squad last year, their biggest piece they lost was Will McDonald, all Big 12 edge rusher, now in the NFL. I believe he was the highest graded pass rusher in the Big 12 last season, so that was a major loss for them. At the other edge spot, they lost MJ Anderson, who was kind of slept on, but was one of the 15 highest graded defensive ends and edge rushers in the Big 12 last season. And he's now in the NFL, I believe, with the Seahawks. And so that's 2 NFL edge rushers that you lost. Iowa State's not a team that's always reloading. They're really good at developing a lot of kind of that 3-star, low 4-star talent, but it's not an immediate thing. And so at the edge positions this season, I believe J.R. Singleton, I think he's actually more of like a 3-tech guy, but and then Tyler Onyedem, I believe that's how you say his name, is redshirt sophomore. These guys both grade in the bottom half of Big 12 edge rushers of the Big 12 among edge rushers and defensive linemen. Um, Quinn Ewers having time to sit back in the pocket and pick apart the defense, I think can be dangerous this weekend. But then you also get the trade-off here for Iowa State where, do you send 6-man pressures, maybe seventh on a delayed blitz, or seventh on a delayed pressure too, and then, risk, those quick passes out to a guy like Worthy or to Mitchell or, getting JT Sanders down the seams or in the flat. Because, JT Sanders, I think this is another game where you're facing this 3-3-5 flyover defense where, if he's facing a linebacker going down the seams, this is where JT needs to have a big game. Get some play action, especially if Texas is having some success on the ground early. Find JT and just let him have a field day against this Iowa State defense. Iowa State's got a lot of size in their secondary. That's no doubt. I believe Miles Purchase isn't he like 6'4", something like that? Jeremiah Cooper like 6'2". Am I getting them? Malik Verdon, actually, the guy that's about 6'4".
TJ Tampa's 6'2", big guy.
Bo Freiler, 6'2", about 210, 220. They got some big guys back there, but again, Sanders, I think, is a guy that you can kind of get out in space. They might be a little bit more physical against him, but I think he can still be a yards after the catch guy in those situations as well. But it's just a way to find some, easy gains down the seam. Again, it's one of the ways you can attack this 3-3-5 defense, especially when they're playing, if they're playing a middle high safety. And so, otherwise, I don't have any concerns about this Texas offensive line. Dominique Orange is probably Iowa State's best guy along the defensive front. And Texas's interior offensive line has been playing really well. I posted this week. Jake Majors has the highest pass blocking grade of any center in the Big 12, and he's got the best pass blocking efficiency rating. He's been spectacular. Been getting healthier down the stretch. DJ Campbell's been playing pretty well. Hayden Connor, he's had his slip ups with some pulling blocking assignments, but and then obviously in run blocking, I think he's not moving guys off the football, but in pass protection, he's been doing pretty well. And so from that perspective, I think Texas is in a good spot. Do you have anything that you want to add on that part?
No, I mean, all good points. The Iowa State defensive front isn't going to bully you around. I mean, you mentioned the secondary is more physical, not as speedy. I think you could almost say the opposite for the front. They're a little bit undersized. And so that's going to lead to Texas is going to have to communicate well if they do start bringing exotics. And I think as the season has progressed, we've seen that communication on the line just continue to grow to where we're at a point now where I feel very confident that they'll be able to keep Ewers upright. Also important to know, Ewers still probably not at 100% with the throwing shoulder injury. For him to feel like he's in a clean pocket, it's going to make all the worlds of a difference because he's not really going to want to take those big hits with the stinger on his shoulder. So for the offensive line to keep him upright in the first quarter and him to start growing that confidence and play his way into the game, I think it's going to be massive.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll add to that, I mean, Ewers has been good with a clean pocket this season. I mean, he's been good just in general, but fourth highest graded passer with a clean pocket in the Big 12 this season among quarterbacks. So if he does have time to throw, I think he can pick apart this Iowa State defense, especially with the weapons he has. And, Texas has been healthy in the receiving core lately, so that's good. And, this is a natural transition to my second point. I think that Xavier Worthy and Adonai Mitchell can exploit the Iowa State pass defense that's been pretty inconsistent against some of the better passing offenses in the Big 12. Again, a similar stat to what I cited earlier with Iowa State's, issues getting pressure on the quarterback against the better offensive lines they faced this season. The four best passing offenses they faced in Big 12 play this year, they've allowed over 250 passing yards in 3 of those 4 games. Sure, on the season, I think they're averaging about 215 yards against, less than a touchdown and a half per game through the air. So they've been pretty solid in that regard. They do get a lot of interceptions. I think they got 15 on the year, one of the Big 12 leaders as a team there. But I think situationally, there's ways that Texas can exploit them. Again, I mentioned the success that teams like Oklahoma, Kansas, Oklahoma State were having against them, whether it be hitting big shots or just getting guys out in space. I like Texas's chances here to have success through the air. Namely, I think that Xavier Worthy versus TJ Tampa is a matchup that Texas can exploit. Xavier Worthy, man, he just ate Josh Newton's lunch last week. I know that's been talked about a good bit, but I posted a stat on the Twitter page this week and mentioned it in a few articles. Josh Newton had not allowed over 55 receiving yards in pass coverage in any start at TCU in the last 2 years before facing Xavier Worthy and the Longhorns last weekend. He allowed, I think it was about 107 against Worthy, 2 pass interference calls. And then they finally adjusted to giving him a little bit more help. Started shadowing him with the safety a little bit more. And then you started to see Texas turn to the ground game more. There were some kind of missed shots for Texas in the passing game in the second half as well. So his production kind of slowed down after, halfway into the third quarter. But, if Iowa State is going to roll with TJ, here, let me say a little bit about TJ Tampa first. Spectacular cornerback, I think, for them. He's been good for them the last 2 seasons. Highest graded cornerback in coverage in the Big 12 this year. Got good size, 6'2". I think he's a future NFL guy. For good reason, they trust him a lot in one-on-one man coverage. He's got the size, he can press, up close to the line of scrimmage. I think that strategy works of letting a corner that's been that productive go one-on-one with guys in the Big 12, but I don't think that works when you're playing Xavier Worthy. Worthy showed, Josh Newton was the second highest graded corner in coverage in the Big 12 entering last weekend. He's now the 8th highest graded corner in coverage in the Big 12. And so Worthy, I think he's just too fast, too good of a route runner, too good in space for Iowa State to have him going one-on-one against against Tampa the entire game. Conversely, if they want to leave Adonai Mitchell in one-on-one situations, again, I know they have good length out there, but Mitchell's fast, and they've been doing good, finding him in the red zone, hitting some shots with him. Obviously, he had the nice catch that sealed the win for Texas against TCU last weekend. Timed the catch on that deep ball really, really well. I think Ewers put it in an okay spot, but just, the amazing body control by Adonai on that play. And so, I think, again, while Iowa State has some guys that can make you pay in the secondary, I mentioned Jeremiah Cooper among my problematic players this week because he leads the Big 12 in interceptions. He's actually given up only 19 or 20 receptions in pass coverage this year, and he has 13 forced incompletions. He's extremely disruptive, good timing on the ball. Tremendous instincts, and he's just been a revelation for them as a sophomore at safety. I think one of the best safeties in the Big 12 this season. So they've got other guys that can help, but I just think that Texas has too many weapons situationally, and I think that Texas is really going to be relying on the passing game this weekend without Brooks in the backfield. And so I think, again, if they're going to go one-on-one against any of Texas's best weapons in the receiving corps, it's going to be a long day for some of these Iowa State corners.
Yeah, I'm a little more apprehensive in regard to the passing game on Saturday night. I mean, Heacock likes to drop 8 a lot when playing, his 3-3-5. And with the injury to Brooks, I think they might be in they're going to try to shorten the game. I mean, you had a stat when we were off air. Iowa State runs in less than 2 plays per minute in conference play on offense. So we know they're not out here trying to put up 45 points a game. They're going to try to shorten the football game. I think they're going to drop 8 a lot. They're going to bracket guys like Worthy and Mitchell, and they're going to make you take 12 plays to get down the field. So I'm a little more apprehensive. I mean, strictly in one-on-one matchup, sure, I like our chances, but I don't know how often those are going to come about. I think Sark's going to have to scheme it up in ways to get his guys in advantageous spots. I mean, one way that you can certainly get them to stop sitting back is if you start off running the ball pretty well as, hitting Whittington, hitting Sanders underneath, and have those safeties start to push up, and then that opens things over the top. But I think at first it might be a little bit of a struggle. The reason why Iowa State is one of the best teams at intercepting quarterbacks this season is because they bait you into making throws. It's a window that looks like it's there, and you try to feather it in there, and you got 2 defenders converging. And I do think that this can be a little bit of an issue, and I'm not as confident in the passing game. I think if you want to win this football game, you're going to have to show that you can move the ball through the air. But I don't think it's going to be as easy as we may think. I do think that Heacock is going to force his Texas team to be patient and run the football. And we've seen Sark be patient and run it down the field. But with Brooks out, how does that change? Is Baxter ready to carry the ball 23 times on Saturday night. I think he is. He's certainly not Jonathan Brooks, but I think he can handle a heavy workload. But yeah, I don't expect Texas to just be out here slinging it around with much success.
It's a fair counter. I think that yardage wise, Texas is probably going to put up a good amount this weekend because I think you're probably looking at a game where Quinn Ewers throwing the ball 35, 40 times. And again, I just don't think Iowa State has faced that many good receivers this year. Monterey Baldwin, Lawrence Arnold are the two guys this season, I believe, that have put up over 100 receiving yards in their games against Iowa State. Um, but, uh, Brennan Thompson actually has the fifth most receiving yards of any receiver that's faced Iowa State this year. So interesting stat there. But I mean, Oklahoma and Oklahoma State both had four receivers each that went over 50 yards against Iowa State. So I think there's different ways you can spread the ball around too. But, Iowa State, I think that they are very disruptive in coverage, but I also think their secondary has been pretty good, very good this year. The problem is that they're not getting the pass rush on guys to be able to get the ball out quick or disrupt a lot of throws. So they got to rely on, like you said, some different coverage schemes and stunts to trick opposing quarterbacks, and honestly, just some really good defensive back play to get 15 interceptions. And it wouldn't surprise me if Quinn Ewers comes out of this game with an interception. It's going to be a tough road environment, but I still think that Texas is going to be relying on the passing game in this one first. Again, I think that's where the majority of the plays will come from. My next point, you kind of were talking about it a second ago. This point more looks at like the Texas defense versus the Iowa State offense and the game at a macro level. But I just think that if Texas does jump out to an early lead in this game, that Iowa State, I don't know if they necessarily have I don't know if they have the players on offense, mainly at quarterback and, the offensive line and the ground game necessary. But I don't think that Iowa State is a team that wants to play fast. So if Texas gets up by 14, 20, 25, 24 points, whatever it be, if they can jump out to that big early lead, that Iowa State's going to have some trouble. That's going to put them off schedule. This is not an Iowa State offense that has been accustomed to playing up tempo this season. They, like you said, have run a little under 2 plays per minute, which ranks in the bottom 10 in the FBS this year, and it's last in the Big 12. It's a big reason for them, maintaining time of possession. They focus on, winning those possession battles, keeping a balanced offense, getting the ball out of Rocco Beck's hands quickly. That's how they get a little over 33 or a little over 32 minutes of possession per game. And keep their defense fresh, keep opposing offenses on the sideline. It is a formula for success if, you're playing with a lead or you're playing in a bunch of close games. Iowa State, they've won 6 games this season. None of them they were down by more than 1 score at any point, let alone down by double digits. And so I think if Texas can get Iowa State in a situation again where you're up by 2-3 scores in the first half, you're going to put that game on the arm of Rocco Becht. And, Iowa State has not really fully opened up the offense for him. He's first-year starter at quarterback. I think he's shown some good stuff. He's been, really solid for them, all things considered. Came into a tough situation this year after, the Hunter Decker suspension. And so I'll laud him for that for sure. I just think that, given Texas' ability to collapse the pocket, and I think that, Texas can handle the Iowa State receivers, in the screen game or short passing game, stuff like that. We'll see with Jalen Noel. That's a different story with him. He's very elusive back there. They get him involved in the short passing game in a number of ways, but the rest of their weapons, they don't really have anyone out of the backfield that's a threat in the passing game. Tight ends aren't really what they are usually at Iowa State, where you have 1 or 2 of those, like great Big 12 tight ends that can be threats in the passing game. And, Jaden Higgins, he's a threat on the boundary, but they mainly like him to get him the ball downfield. Average depth of target around 13 yards. Most of his targets have come with 15 or more air yards on them. So, that requires a little bit more developing play. And so, I think that Texas, if you can put them off schedule early, I think that's a key to success. Because I don't know if Iowa State can can make up that scoring margin as easily as some of the teams that Texas has let up big leads against in the last few weeks. I said this off air, but TCU, Kansas State, Houston, these are all very capable passing offenses that can score quickly, that have a multitude of weapons in the passing game. And I don't know if Iowa State necessarily has that, because Higgins and Noel are very good weapons, don't get me wrong. But outside of that, again, they just rely on methodically moving the ball, kind of dinking and ducking you in a way, and then eventually getting some big shots, potentially exposed to plays to Higgins and Noel. It's a very scripted offense. And so if you knock them off script, I don't know how they will react.
Yeah, no qualms from me on any of the points you made. The only pushback I would have is, I watched, we've seen the Texas defense these past 4 games, and you mentioned it, these offenses that Texas has played, not super similar to the Cyclones, but I've seen Texas blow 3 20-point leads in 3 of the past 4 weeks. So I'm kind of in the mode, prove it to me. I'm not, you'll see as we make our predictions down the stretch, but Texas has to, I think they got to prove it at this point.
My last point, I guess I don't have to spend a ton of time on because you talked about it earlier in the video. I think it's a big deal that Jared Hufford decided to say what he did. Also, the freshman, they got some decent backs, but they haven't faced a defensive front like Texas is yet. T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy, I think, are going to blow up a lot of plays in the backfield. You saw that against TCU last weekend. You've seen it in multiple games this season. They're the 2 highest graded interior defensive linemen in the Power 5. Beyond that, though, Texas got a lot of guys. Iowa State, here's one point that I wanted to get to that I didn't make in the article. Iowa State doesn't run an up-tempo offense, which is very beneficial to Texas, I think, in a few ways. The most notable one being you can keep Sweat and Murphy on the field for more snaps in this game, or at least for a longer amount of time, higher percentage of Iowa State's total offensive plays. Because a team like TCU or Houston and Kansas State in the second half, they're running a really up tempo. Texas had to rotate on defense some in the second half last week to keep guys fresh. Alfred Collins, I think, was still a little banged up. That was on a pitch count. Jahdae Barron, they had to take out for some plays in the second half, put in Jalen Gilbo. I don't see that happening against Iowa State. They picked on Gilbo a little bit last week. TCU did. And I don't think that's going to happen again this weekend.
Yeah, going off that point, just in the same vein, you can keep guys on the field for longer, but also when they do need a break, you can get them off. We've seen it in the fourth quarters where Texas gets caught with the same 11 on the field for 6-7 plays down the field, and that leads to a touchdown. So I think it's a good point that Sark and PK more specifically will be able to pick and choose exactly who is on the field and at what time, because Iowa State really isn't going to press you that much. So I think that's a massive point, and that should definitely be in the favor of the Longhorns.
I think that Texas is in a good spot as long as you can have the ball or possess the ball a little bit more in the second half. You don't go 2 for 8 on third and short, that you're not having all these miscues that Texas had in the passing game last week. I don't know if you saw some of those. Adonai Mitchell, miscommunication on a deep route with Quinn Ewers where he just stopped running.
Mm-hmm. That seemed like it happened twice, I think twice.
Yeah, it might have. You had one where Xavier Worthy just missed a block on a screen pass that would have resulted. I don't remember if that was
to Jonte too.
Jonte Cook, that's right. Worthy just missed a block, and it resulted in a blown up play. But if he had gotten that block downfield, Cook had a lot of room to run. There was 3 or 4 miscues that would have resulted in explosive plays just in the passing game in the second half. So you got to pull that stuff together. Anyway, I guess that leads me to my concerns. First one, and this is an easy one, just being that, Texas is having a difficult time right now running the ball in the second half to possess. I guess difficult time running the ball to put opponents away is a good way to put that. You don't have, this is an obvious point that a lot of people are making for points of concern for Texas for the rest of the season. I get that without Jonathan Brooks, but there's a reason for that. Jonathan Brooks is easily your most effective guy running the inside zone. CJ Baxter can, but he hasn't been as good working through contact this season. He's also not as proven of a threat. I think he's getting there, but he's not there yet. He's not as proven of a threat in the receiving game out of the backfield. I ran this stat earlier this week in Big 12 play. Jonathan Brooks is the only guy that has double-digit first downs for us on third down plays. So who's going to be that guy that will get those key third downs for us, especially in the second halves of games? And so that's a question that needs to be answered. Jaden Blue, I think, needs to step up, but he's more of an outside zone guy, more of a guy that's going to be running off tackle, get to the outside and go. That's a tough strategy against an Iowa State defense that, the point of the 3-3-5 defense is to spill those runs to the outside, get those faster guys on the outside where linebackers, more physical safeties can clean up the play. Iowa State's been good at defending that this season too. And so they're in the upper tier of defenses defending the outside zone this season, averaging a little over 4 yards per carry, but at the grand scheme of things, that's not that much. So, there's going to be a lot on Baxter this weekend. We'll see what Keelan Robinson's health, but that's a legitimate point of concern for me. Something that hopefully is not Texas' undoing, but it's also a reason why Quinn Ewers needs to be really good through the air in this game. Texas can't be making too many mistakes. Turning the ball over often is going to be it is going to be a problem if you do, because again, Iowa State likes to possess the ball for a long time. And so, do you have anything on that? I know we've kind of talked about that a little bit already.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone's taken Brooks's injury lightly, but I do think it could rear its ugly head. It could be more of an issue than we think. I mean, you look at the Texas running back room, one of the deepest units on the team, and you got 5-star freshman CJ Baxter. You got, high 4-star Jaden Blue, Keelan Robinson, Savion Red, you got Trey Wisner. It goes deep. But man, Baxter has come along as the season's progressed because he's gotten more healthy. But there was a stark difference when Brooks was on the field and when Baxter's on the field. You can tell. Brooks, he's just got that pop. He's got that oomph. Baxter's a patient runner, which is something that typically takes a while to develop. So good on him that, at 18, 19 years old, he's so patient. But he doesn't hit the hole the same as Brooks. Brooks has a, tremendous tendency, same as Bijan, to fall forward, get those extra couple yards, where Baxter seems to get stood up a little more. And I do think there could be a little bit of an issue running ball. I'm excited to see Jaden Blue get more touches. I think unarguably, he's one of the fastest guys on the team. And obviously, a lot of his touches have come in more garbage time moments, but he does some good things when he does get the ball in his hands. Sark mentioned he's chomping at the bit to get some touches. So I'd expect Blue to get, 6 to 8 touches on Saturday night. Hopefully he can make the most of it. Last week, early in the game, Sark tried to set him up on it was an outside screen, which was nice to see because he hadn't been getting a ton of looks during, real meaningful game action. But yeah, I think there's going to be a massive drop off. I know Baxter is a really highly rated running back and he's done some good things this year, but I do think that the loss of Brooks cannot be overstated. And I say that, and I don't see anyone understating the loss, but I do want to mention it because when you play on the road against a team like Iowa State, you're going to need to run the football. I haven't looked at the conditions. I don't expect it to be perfect weather, mid to late November in Ames, Iowa. So, yeah, I think Baxter hopefully he's going to have to grow up here, and hopefully he does, because if not, then you're completely relying on Quinn Ewers. And if Heacock can sit back with his defense and drop 8 because we can't run it against, a 3-man front, that's going to be a big, big issue.
Yeah, this is the telling stat for me situationally for Baxter. It's that, and you're right. I'll start with that, is that explain some context here. Baxter, he's shown, I think recently, he's been trusted with more handoffs in the last 3 games than any other 3-game stretch this season. Part of that due to injury, but I think part of that due to his maturation process this fall. He runs hard, but and he, like you said, he knows how to hit the hole. But being able to fight through contact and fight through some of, some of those tackle attempts where you really need to be, finding a way to pick up those 2 or 3 valuable yards in third and fourth down situations, at least fourth down when it comes to it. On the goal line too, it's important to be able to fight for those extra yards. And so Baxter has yet to show that he can do that consistently. I have a stat pulled up here that's yards after contact per attempt on zone carries in the second half.
Oh, okay. That's okay. That's digging pretty deep. Let's hear it.
But it shows to me it's a very specific picture of the exact thing we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Second fewest in the Big 12, 1.8.
What's the sample size on that, if you have it?
21. It's any Big 12 running back that has, in Big 12 play, mind you, that has at least 10 carries.
Okay.
In the second half in the zone ground game. On the other hand, Jonathan Brooks is 5th in the Big 12, 2.9 yards after contact per attempt. That's a lot. That's more than a yard in a very tight situation. I mean, we're talking about guys at this point that Jonathan Brooks is up there with. The only guys above him are DJ Giddens, Corey Kiner, Ollie Gordon, CJ Donaldson. All big physical runners, some of the best running backs in the Big 12. Baxter, meanwhile, is only behind Houston's backup running back. So that's...
what's pretty telling is, I mean, we came into the season and
in front of.
Sorry. No, you're good. So he's only in front of.
Yeah.
He's set. Okay. Yeah, that's not great. I mean, we came into the season thinking Baxter would be more of like a short yardage back just because of the way he's built. But it's obvious that Sark knows that that's not really the case because we've seen the short yardage transition. I mean, against Oklahoma, you tried 3 times with Jonathan Brooks. People are like, oh, why don't you put in Baxter? The transition wasn't to Baxter. It was to Savion Red in the Wildcat package. So it's obvious that Sark kind of knows what he has and that he knows his players' strengths and weaknesses. And, yeah, I mean, breaking through that first point of contact really isn't a strength for CJ. I think it will progress as his time on the 40 acres comes along, but it's not something that I expect to just change this Saturday night.
Agreed. And this is the last thing I'll say on this because I don't want to be harping on this forever because I think CJ is a solid back. I think he's very talented. And I think he's going to be very good. And I think he's had a pretty good season so far.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
For being a true freshman. And, he's got to step up now. But this is a point of concern for me. This is a stat that kind of shows me that he might not be as shifty as I thought he was in these situations. So a little bit of a different context here. He's the only back in this kind of filter context that I'm presenting here of 10 or more carries on second half zone rushing attempts. He's the only one that doesn't have a broken or missed tackle. I think for him, the key to success this weekend is going to be the interior offensive line getting a better push because they're facing, outside of Dominique Orange, who's a 6'4", 340-pound nose tackle, and I think potentially could be in the NFL in the future. I think the rest of the Iowa State offense or defensive line, I think you can get to the second level against them. So that's what you need for Baxter, I think, this weekend. If you can get the offensive line, getting him a good push, and you can start building up the confidence a little bit as the game goes along, start wearing down that Iowa State defensive front that really doesn't have much depth. That's where you can start opening up more running lanes for Baxter, and you can start seeing more of that success unfold in the second half. There were 2 more points that I had, but I'm going to kind of lump them into one here. And one's actually kind of a bonus point, if you will. This one is a valid concern, too. It's that Iowa State's deep shots and inside breaking routes with Jaden Higgins and Jalen Newell, I think pretty much no matter what are going to give Texas issues. These are 2 very good wide receivers for Iowa State. Jalen Newell, need I mention, did some damage to Texas last season. 6 catches, 94 yards, 2 touchdowns, burned Anthony Cook on a deep route there, and then Austin Jordan on another one. If he was burning Texas's safeties last year, I hate to think what he might be able to do this year. I don't mean to have the bleak outlook on that, but I think that's something to watch. I'm being too negative in this video, so I'll pick it back up a little bit because, again, I think these are very valid concerns, but I am optimistic about this game and about this team. Jalen Newell, he's their special teams threat, good receiver. They mainly like to use him short passing game. 57% of his targets are in the short passing game this year, so they like to get him out on those short designed routes and get him out in space, let him make some things happen after the catch. He leads the team in yards after contact, yards after the catch. about 275 this season. And he has 3 kick returns of over 40 yards this season. He's almost housed 2 of them, but I think 2 of them he went out inside the opponent's 10-yard line. So he's dangerous there as well. Just dangerous out in space, good playmaker. They like to run out of the slot. And then Jaden Higgins, big 6'4", Eastern Kentucky transfer on the boundary that they like to use in the deep passing game, some in the intermediate too. I mentioned him at the outset of the video. He's a guy that has most of his targets come at least 15 air yards, and Texas had trouble, not necessarily against the bigger possession receivers. I don't think that's necessarily an issue because Ryan Watts does well against a lot of those guys with his length and his physicality. But, Texas against these guys that can get deep on you, can get over the top, that's been an issue, especially when you need safety help and quick safety help at that. Texas's safeties have not been super rangy this season, and pass coverage have not been quick to close on the ball. I'm a little concerned in this game that I do think that Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel can help Rocco Becht, get maybe a few big plays in this game, few explosive plays that can open up the run game a little bit more for Iowa State. But mainly that I think this is, the big plays, I think, to Higgins and Noel are really their only way that if you do get ahead early, that they're going to be able to come back in any legitimate fashion. So those 2 guys, over 1,000 receiving yards combined this season. I think over 80 catches. They're good.
Yeah, and I'd be remiss to note Benjamin Brahmer at tight end. Iowa State always has those tight ends that have killed the Horns. He's their 3rd leading receiver. He's a guy to watch out for. 21 catches, 272 yards. Young player. Luckily, we'll only have to play him just this one time because that's a guy like 3 years down the line. He's going to develop into an all Big 12 type of tight end, probably an NFL guy as well. He's just a freshman this year, but he's someone to watch for on 3rd downs in the slot. And we have seen our linebackers grow in coverage as the season has progressed, but there still have been a few snafus, so that's definitely something to watch. But, yeah, not overly talented at the skill positions, but guys who will beat you if you give them the opportunity. If you're busting coverages, it's not like if you're busting coverages, Becht isn't going to find his guys. They're going to pick you apart if you don't bring, at least your A game, A- game.
Yeah, those inside breaking routes are something I'm going to be watching too. Rod, I mentioned this in a tweet earlier in the week. Rod Babers brought up this point that for some reason Texas has specifically had issues. I know why for some of them, like the crossing routes and some of the inside drag routes, Texas just has issues, with communication, I think, a lot of times, and with linebackers and safeties finding their assignments, just knowing where to be. Like, when you're playing the 2-4-5 defense specifically, your linebackers have to be very communicative. And Anthony Hill, I just don't think he's necessarily there yet. The safety's got to be quick to react to know where they need to be. Keaton Crawford, some of Michael Taft, Jaron Thompson, I think he knows where to be, but he's just been a little slow to get there. Iowa State can exploit some of those issues that Texas has had on the inside breaking routes this season, where Higgins, not more Noel than Higgins, Brahmer too. They can, get him over the middle and do some damage. But, these guys have been good on the inside breaking routes this season to where that might be a potential issue for Texas. The last thing I'll say, because we got to get up and rolling here before too long, is red zone efficiency. Iowa State's been pretty good this season, punching the ball in. Utilizing again Higgins on the outside. They like to target him. Brahmer has been a decent red zone target for them, and they run the ball decently well in the red zone too. They like to load up, use some protection heavy fronts. Getting like 22 personnel out there or 12 personnel, get some blockers around the line of scrimmage. I don't know how successful that's going to be, that approach with just those protection heavy fronts against Texas. That's where Texas has actually been good in the red zone, is on defense. Their best red zone defense in the Big 12, but on offense, they're second worst in conference play. And so, Iowa State, 3rd best red zone defense. I am a little worried about Texas's ability to score in the red zone this weekend, specifically when the field condenses, and then Iowa State secondary can really flex their muscles, because you're not going to be able to target a guy like Adonai Mitchell as easily, or JT Sanders, when the field's condensed and Iowa State can fully utilize their 5 strong defensive backs. They don't have to cover as much field. I don't know why I just picked 3 different ways to say the same thing, but it's a thing where you're just gonna have to find a way to run the ball. Ewers, you mentioned earlier, he's not going to want to take much contact, so I don't think you're going to see like him scrambling a bunch. You're either going to have to find a way to get Jaden Blue out to the outside, or maybe work on a tunnel screen here or there. But that's a concern for me, as it usually is, because Texas has had issues all season scoring in the red zone.
Yeah, I think just on the flip side, you mentioned Iowa State offense solid in the red zone. I think that's because Campbell's not super aggressive, though. So that's why their red zone scoring percentage looks so high. They've nearly kicked field goals on half of their red zone possessions. I think I saw in conference play it was like 14 touchdowns, 10 field goals. So that's
18 touchdowns, 18 field goals.
Okay. Yeah. See, you mentioned that off air. You can cut this, but I'm reading the AP article and it has 14-10. So they screwed that one up. But
maybe yes, wrong.
But yeah, so I think Iowa State's proclivity to kick field goals and take points is a good thing for Texas. I mean, we've seen in the past, namely come to mind last year against Texas Tech, where teams a little outgunned, but they just convert so many fourth downs that there's really nothing you can do. And I think as long as Iowa State's somewhat in this game, Campbell's going to take the points, especially early. So that gives me hope. It's not going to be a game where you really fall behind by too many unless the red zone defense is really poor.
Yeah. I have trust in our red zone defense to hold up this weekend. Okay. All right. There's 2 quick parting shots I want to do. So let me look it up. Right. I'll bring it up right now. We can actually do our score predictions first, and then I actually had some over-unders I wanted us to tackle. I wish I had done this earlier in the season. It's always fun to look at these. Kind of like we did with the midseason video a few weeks ago, where we took a look at who would finish as stat leaders. But I have not published they come tomorrow, the preview piece with the score prediction. So Texas right now is a 7.5-point favorite. I think the opening over under was at 49.5.
It's down to 46.5 now.
Okay, maybe it was at 40. I think it was either at 48 or 49.5 to open up. So okay, that's condensed. Yeah, 46.5. Wow. So obviously Vegas expecting a low scoring game in Ames this weekend. I think that Texas is going to come out with what did we score on them? 24 last year. Texas during this whole stretch has been hovering around that like 28 to 31 point mark.
Just missed 30 for
TCU.
Which would
every one of them has been between 28 and 34. You know what? I'll go on the high end of that. I'll say that Texas holds off Iowa State again. I think that Iowa State could make a run there kind of late, but I think that this game could look a little bit more like the Baylor game last year, because didn't Texas win that by like 10?
Yeah, they ended up
So I could see Texas through the air in this game. Actually, I think between the 20s, Texas is going to be really good through the air. I'll say 34-21.
34-21. So I've gone back and forth on this. I think it's going to be a close game, and I actually think Iowa State is going to pull it out. And I'm not one of those people.
Whoa.
I'm not one of those guys. Like, obviously, we saw the Whittington comment, like, you're 9-1, quit complaining. I do not fall into one of those games. Like, we could win every game 2-0, and I would be absolutely ecstatic. I mean, it's all about the win. I don't care how you get it. This team has just been too inconsistent. I know two of the 3 games where you gave up the leads were with a backup quarterback. Or no, only one of them 3 games. But I mean, granted, I don't trust this team. And
one of the games too, Ewers went down.
Yeah, Ewers was down at the end. It's tough. I go back on it every week. I think this team could win a national championship. And I just as easily think that they could finish. I mean, finishing 10-2 is a great season, but finishing 10-2 and not making the Big 12 title is going to be really unfortunate. And I just have bad feeling about going into Ames on senior night. Iowa State wearing the all black. They're going to be ready to play. I do think that the comment by, I keep forgetting his name. I don't even
Jared
care to,
Bufford.
yeah, I don't even care to learn his name. But I do think that that comment is actually pretty big, and that almost made me flip my pick to Texas. Because yes, of course, Texas should be ready to go no matter what with what they have left to play, but it just seems like they've been a little flat, and so hopefully that they turn it around there. But I have a bad feeling. I think Ewers is going to cough it up a couple times. I just don't have a good feeling. It's one of those things where everything on paper leads you to believe that Texas should win this game. Everything on paper leads you to believe Texas would win all their previous games by multiple scores, and then they let you down. And we can't keep coming back to every single opening press conference from Sark saying, just wait for this team to put it together. Like, we're waiting. Granted, I don't care. I really don't care. If they win, like I said, they can win. It could be any score. I really don't care.
You
But
were you were just screaming mass against Texas fan this week.
I just yeah, I just think that I just think that they're going to get clipped playing the way that they're playing, or finishing the games the way they're finishing games. So yeah, I'm going 26-24 Iowa State. I hope, for the love of God, I hope I'm wrong.
So you think they're going to get like a game-winning field goal?
Yeah, and I think I think it's
heartbreaking.
going to come right down to the
Holy
end.
crap, that would suck.
Yeah, and man, yeah, it's going to, if Texas loses this game, I don't
November
know.
in Ames is never an easy spot. Never has been for title contenders ever.
Yeah.
Regardless, almost, if Iowa State's bad or good,
Hmm.
doesn't matter. So I mean, to some degree, I get the pessimism heading into the game. For sure. This is weird that I'm the optimistic one by such a large margin this week. I'm eager to see Targ score prediction on the, just to compare. So, okay, before we get up and go on here, because I got to roll in a second, I got some prize picks numbers up here that I think will be interesting to go through. So Quinn Ewers, right? His over-under is 251.5 for passing yards. Do you go over or under? I'll start. I mean, obviously for me, I'm quite optimistic about his output on Saturday because he almost had 251 by halftime against TCU.
Yeah.
I think he'll probably have around 280 this weekend, maybe 300, because I just think we're going to be passing the ball too much.
Yeah, I would go over as well. I think we'll be able to move the ball decently well. Like, I don't know. I don't think the big plays are going to be there. Not to completely relate it back to my score prediction. I just think that some of these, on the margin type plays, like I don't think the fourth downs are going to go our way. 6 for 28 on third down the last two games. I think Bert Auburn's probably due for a miss at some point in time. Like, I just think these, the turnover margin paired with third, fourth down, red zone efficiency, I think these things are going to start to stack up against you and will eventually lead to a loss. But no, I wouldn't be surprised if Quinn, has a pretty decent counting stats day. So I'll go over on that as well.
All right. CJ Baxter, 80 or over under 80.5 rushing yards. I'm going under because I think that I could see like 50 to 70 this week, and I can see him getting involved in the receiving game. But I think 80.5 pure rushing yards, that would, for him to go over, if he goes over that, I feel really good about Texas's chances to win this game.
Yeah, I agree with the latter of what you said. I'm also going to agree with the under. I think he's going to get stuffed a little too much to make up those yards. Like, I do think we'll see him break to the second level a couple times, but which is another problem at a macro level. I think you're going to be finding yourself in, second and 9 too often. That if he gets 15 carries, if, 5 of them only go for a yard or two, it's going to be tough to get to that 80-yard mark.
Yeah. And the last one here is compounding Florida and Texas into one line.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
It's over under for receiving yards with Ricky Pearsall and Xavier Worthy. It's 134.5. So Worthy specifically is 66.5, which I think that would then put Pearsall around 68. Florida is playing Missouri, a team that just really shut down Tennessee. And then obviously Worthy, we're playing Iowa State this weekend. I think Worthy is going over 66.5. Obviously, judging from what I was saying earlier, with the point about him going one-on-one against Tampa. I don't think Pearsall is going to hold up his end of the bargain on that one, though. Just I have watched a good bit of Mizzou this season. Luther Burden is a really fun wide receiver to watch. And so and Mizzou's just playing really well. But I think that, yeah, I think that's under, but I think that's because of Pearsall.
I'm gonna go over. I think I love Ricky Pearsall. He's a
I think
dog.
he's good. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. The way Mizzou was able to contain Tennessee last weekend is a little bit of concerning, and not to completely go on a side tangent, but it could be a bit of a letdown spot. They're still playing at home. We knew how much that Tennessee game meant to Drinkwitz, and Missouri is not really playing it for anything. They can't win the East, so they're just kind of playing it for the name on the front and the back at this point. And yeah, I love watching Pearsall.
An at-large bid for a New Year's Six.
Yeah,
potentially.
yeah.
That's something.
No, I'm
They
going
have
over.
Vanderbilt next week, though, so they can put don't they have Vanderbilt next week? Or no, they already have Vanderbilt. No, they have Arkansas next week. Even still,
Yeah,
they
no,
can
the
put
Arkansas have given up.
yeah, even still, they can put a lot into this Florida game.
That's true.
Potentially that nail in the coffin for Billy Napier if they lose, if Florida loses bad enough, you think? That could be good for Texas too.
Depends. Yeah, it's already
After
proven
Xavier
good.
Hill saying, yeah, I already
Yeah,
flipped Wardell Mack from Florida. So I mean, yeah.
I think he gets a year with Lagway, but no, I think it'll be over. I get what you're saying. I mean, the way Mizzou was able to defend the pass against Tennessee was outstanding last week, but I think Pearsall's too good, and I think Worthy's too good. I think they both. I think they're going to combine to go over. And if one of them has a little bit of a slip up, I think the other one's good enough to pick up the slack. Like I wouldn't be surprised if one of them went for over 100, which then leads the other to only need like 35 yards or whatever you had the total at. So yeah, that's an interesting one, but I'd go over.
Okay. All right. Well, I will. I mean, we'll have the stat predictions up on the site this week. Between Tarek, you get Tarek and Brian's also got another new addition to the site this week too. So potentially get his in there as well. But yeah, anyway, excited for this one. It seems we have some different ideas on the stat this week about how this game's going to go. So like I said, I'll be eager to see what Brian and Tarek have to say for score predictions. So stay tuned for the site. Again, I'll link some of our work down in the description below. But anyway, for Shane Black, Andrew Miller, HookMheadlines.com, that's pretty much it. Welcome.